All right, welcome back to Good Evening. Right now, it is time for When Monet Meets Debussy, our Wednesday segment with Christine, who has joined us live here in the studios. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty well. I've had a pretty full day today, so I'm ready to get relaxed here.
Okay.
Have a little bit of a fun.
Unwind a little bit. Now, we are on chapter 2 of this segment. Last week, we did When Monet Meets Debussy, but today we're moving onwards and upwards and talking about artists and music and the amalgamation of the two. And now we're talking about the space between the notes. That's something we did last time. What else are we going to talk about today?
Well, so before I say the name of the painting for tonight, I just wanted to set some groundwork first.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
Are you going to set a scene for us?
Yes, I'll set a scene for our listeners. So come with me on this journey.
Okay.
So just before the sun rises and its crimson colors take over the eastern sky, you might have seen an incredibly bright spot close to the horizon. What you see is the morning star, the brightest object to appear in the heavens just before dawn. So looking out from his window, Van Gogh remembers seeing this bright light, stronger than the moon's, promising the daybreak waiting just beyond the horizon. A tinge of canary yellows and tangerines pierced behind a dreamy light on the horizon, sprawling across the rolling hills, with hints of lime and lemon hues dispersing into the deep indigo sky. Vincent wrote to his brother Theo, "This morning I saw the countryside from my window a long time before the sunrise, with nothing but the morning star, which looked very big." After having a mental breakdown at the end of 1888, Van Gogh admitted himself to an asylum in southern France the next summer. It's from his small window with iron bars in his room in Saint-Remy, where Van Gogh saw the night sky described in his letter to his brother. He spent the first of his last 2 years mostly in solitude in this countryside room where he painted one of the most recognized paintings in the history of Western culture.
All right, that was an interesting and really nice setup to what we're going to be talking about. Obviously, Van Gogh, right?
Yeah, so you might have been able to guess what we just heard was the third movement of Maurice Ravel's Miroirs from 1906. It's called A Boat on the Ocean.
Oh, and so is that, you're setting up a lot of ocean imagery, a lot of night imagery. What are we going to be covering today then?
Yeah, so we're talking about the Starry Night.
Oh, okay. So probably, I don't want to say his most famous, but really up there as far as a very iconic painting from Vincent van Gogh. And I have to say the music really does give that a kind of whimsical imagery.
Yeah, I think so. And, this song was made for the ocean, but it goes all along really well with the turbulent movements of the brushstrokes in Starry Night. Like you said, Starry Night is so popular. I had a little bit of a difficulty when I was researching for this because I thought I knew what it looked like.
Oh, really?
And I had to take a moment to actually look at it, It's become so iconic that I had to really look at the painting again.
Well, it's funny because we can see this painting all over the place on umbrellas and cell phone covers and almost anywhere that you can print it, it's been printed on. But Van Gogh really did put a lot of effort into this. And I don't know, did you enjoy looking at this painting? I mean, how did you feel when you were researching this?
Well, to be honest, I really love Van Gogh's use of color in his paintings. I've seen one of his paintings in Budapest in Hungary, and it was so beautiful, I actually was moved to tears.
Oh.
I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit, but I've never been a big fan of Starry Night, I think because I've seen it printed so many times.
Well, you know, it's funny that you mentioned seeing Van Gogh's paintings. I've also been able to actually see Starry Night, one version of it. It didn't move me to tears, but, you know, the whole setup and kind of the hype of it was pretty exciting. You know, when you go into some places, anytime you go see a Van Gogh, there's a little bit of an excitement, a nice feeling that you have. And just looking at Starry Night, and again, you look at all the little brushstrokes and you imagine, you know, he's doing all this work, painting each piece individually. It is really, really nice. Now, not just Starry Night, but Van Gogh has other famous paintings, right?
Yeah, so I have a few printouts of his paintings from the same year.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so if you look at these paintings on the bottom there, what do you see in them?
Well, you know, it's funny. I'm looking at his famous self-portrait. And again, he has another one, which I want to say is olive trees or something along those lines. But they are all so much movement going on in these paintings. And that's one thing Van Gogh had going for him, was that his unique style of, you know, just brush strokes, that it made it come alive and seem like it's really, really kind of jumping out at you.
Yes, exactly. So these were all painted in 1889, the same year that Starry Night was painted, and they are known for their signature swirls, especially the blue portrait that you're talking about, and the cypress trees as well.
Oh, cypress trees. Okay.
And we'll go back to the cypress trees, but they do appear in Starry Night, and so you see some of his signature, motifs at the time appearing here. And also, I think one thing I noticed is all of these paintings, there's a shift in tone. So just the year before, he was painting a lot of bright colors, lots of yellows, lots of golden hues. And here we see a lot of blues, but really cold blues. You know, they feel, they're light.
Yeah, like that he's really expressing his own emotion through these blue colors. It's not like his blue period, not like a Picasso blue period, but he does have a very distinct, I guess, shift, you could say, right?
Yeah. And there's also a lot of dark lines. I think just the color and the tonal change is notable here. And I also wanted to show you a couple more paintings here.
Oh, okay. Now, I do recognize this one. It's a very famous cafe scene. I think it's like a terrace, right?
Yeah, it's called Terrace at Night.
And, you know, I actually did this one as a puzzle before. I don't know if you've ever done any of big artworks on puzzles, but it's something interesting because you have all these individual pieces and you're trying to fit them together. And as you go, you just kind of see individual brushstrokes that you're trying to match together. And I remember staring at this painting for hours trying to do this puzzle. So I definitely feel a connection to it, like you know it a little bit better. I don't know if you ever had that feeling before of looking at something for so long.
That's so interesting. I think that would be a great way for us to restudy iconic paintings, you know, take some time and meditate on them and really look at them closely.
But are these done before or after this period? They're a little bit brighter. It seems like a little more livelier.
They were roughly around the same time, but what's notable about these were painted at night.
Oh.
So there's another Starry Night there on the right, and on the left is the Terrace at Night. And both of them have blues, but it's a different type of blue from the previous paintings I showed you.
It's like more of a, I want to say a little more vibrant, less dull.
They are. Somehow they're both blue, but these blues are more vibrant. They're richer, and it goes along with what Van Gogh says about the night. So, you know, Van Gogh's kind of like the black sheep of Impressionist painters.
Okay.
So I thought it was interesting that he was studying light at night, and he wrote to his brother, I often think that the night is more alive and more richly colored than the day.
Oh.
So he found color at night, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea that, and I just try to imagine what he was seeing, because when we look at the night, we think of, but he's seen so much light and so many different shades that's coming to life. He must have very interesting perspective, even on these kind of mundane scenes of a terrace at night.
And the colors are almost neon. It looks like they're backlit because he's using really, really bright colors, and he uses impasto technique, which means it's just thick paint and they're laid right next to each other, wet on wet. If you look at the brush strokes closely in Starry Night, you'll notice that it's really flickering with a lot of light and color.
And, there is definitely some texture there. If you've ever seen his paintings in person, they're not just, matted on there. They are really alive. So I recommend if anyone ever gets a chance, even if you have to go out of your way a little bit, to go check out some of these paintings. But, Starry Night is just so iconic. And yet at the same time, when you look at it, there's so much going on. I forgot there's cypress trees in there.
Yeah, there's the big cypress tree on the left. So if it's like this, it looks like a flame going into the sky. And what's interesting about this tree is that it's appearing a lot closer to the sky than it actually would from his window.
Yeah.
So he tried to make the trees look a lot bigger. And the cypress tree actually represents mourning. It was often symbols used in funerals in the Western culture.
Okay.
So you can tell that Vincent van Gogh is thinking about death. He's meditating on such meanings. And another thing I wanted to bring up was the morning star that we began the segment with. So the really, really bright white star on the bottom left is actually the morning star, which appears right before sunrise.
Oh, okay. I never really thought about all of the symbolism in these paintings, because oftentimes I just thought he was painting kind of landscapes or, just kind of painting the scenery.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of symbolism that goes into his paintings, right?
So his interests are actually a little bit different from the Impressionists. He's more interested in abstraction, in bringing in his thoughts and his emotions, his inner self, onto the canvas with these symbols.
Oh, okay.
So and that's why you see things like the morning star, which is a religious connotation, and also the church there that's depicted. The steeple is actually not something that is commonly found in France, but it actually comes from his home country of Holland.
Oh, so he's kind of mashing up the two and really creating his own sceneries that are probably going on inside of his head. And when you put it all together, you get beautiful paintings of starry nights and just the night sky in general. He did such a great job.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you, there are so many interpretations of what people think Van Gogh was trying to depict in this painting. What do you think it is about?
Well, now that you've said a little bit about the morning star and about the steeple, I'm seeing a lot more imagery of almost a movement, because the swirls of maybe someone after they pass away moving on to the next. I don't know if I'm reading into it too deep, but with all of the religious and kind of the upward movement of the cypress tree, it gives that kind of idea,
I think so. I think that's something that many people have noticed, is this connection between the ground and the sky with the tree. So I think that is a valid interpretation. And another interesting thing, some people have noted that the swirls, in fact, they look very similar to a drawing that was published just before this painting was made, a few decades before that, in mid-19th century. William Parsons made a drawing of a swirl, what is it called? A swirl nebula.
Oh, okay. So an actual nebula. He was an astronomer then? Or someone, studying
So
the
he was
stars?
studying astronomy, and through his 72-inch telescope, he saw this swirl nebula, and he drew it. If you see the pictures, it looks a lot like the swirls in his painting.
That's funny too, because before the time of, internet searches and easily looking up pictures of nebula, you almost had to take someone's account of it, their own drawing, but at the same time, their own description of what they saw. And you get a lot of room for imagination there. So, maybe when he was looking at this drawing and then probably reading a description about colors, because it's kind of hard to convey in these, print forms, probably in a journal or something. mind, he probably had his own imagination of what these other worlds would like. And, it's nice that before it's kind of cemented in with a solid photo, you get to imagine it like Van Gogh's perspective of swirling nebulas and movement and all these amazing colors that he came up with.
Yeah, and I really love it. I love how he is drawing artistic inspiration from perhaps a scientific journal that he read. We do know that he was into reading about astronomy.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, he wrote to his brother Theo. This is a very famous quote that people have linked to the painting. He says, "I don't know anything with certainty, but seeing the stars makes me dream."
Oh.
He said, "Why, I say to myself, should the spots of light in the firmament be less accessible to us than the black spots on the map of France? Just as we can take a train to go to Tarascon or Rouen, we take death to go to a star."
Oh, so wow, he really had some insight into, his own beliefs about looking up at the stars. And we all do that from time to time, look up at the stars and wonder. But he was able to put it so poetically. And they really did. The stars, the night sky played a huge impact on his life.
Yeah. What do you think about when you look at the stars at night?
Well, I always think about someone looking back. I think a lot of people think like, oh, I wonder if someone's looking back. Maybe it's even like a big curve and you're looking at yourself. Something that I think about when I look up at the night sky. And recently, I was able to kind of go out to the countryside and look at some better stars away from the city lights. And it always never ceases to amaze me, all the beautiful stars.
It's incredible. I think it's really awe-inspiring. And that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about is, with our bare eyes, we can see up to 6,000 stars in the night sky if there's no pollution. But the Hubble telescope, it sees a lot more because it has the technology and it's outside of our atmosphere. So the Hubble actually celebrated its 30th birthday 2 weeks ago, and they published a really stunning image. On the left bottom of the image, there's a blue gas ring around a little star.
It looks like a Van Gogh painting.
It does look like a Van Gogh painting. Very similar colors that you see. And this star is actually 200,000 times brighter than our sun.
Wow, really? Well, first, the image is amazing. If you do get a chance, I hope everyone can go and check out some of these Hubble telescope celestial images. But it's funny that Van Gogh kind of had it right. He imagined these colors and he really did a good job matching it. I have Starry Night and this one side by side. For me, it looks like almost the same blues being used.
Yeah, and this amazing red cloud in the middle of the image, this is actually what is called a star nursery. So baby stars are being born here. But this image is 163,000 light years away.
Wow.
So they're actually not babies anymore.
Yeah, they're not babies. And, it's funny, every time we look at these images, we're looking just at a picture of the past because it's so different, from now. But, astronomy is really, really interesting. And I'm glad that we're getting a chance to not only talk about Van Gogh, but also his connection to the stars.
Yeah. I kind of think of the Lion King, the part where his father's like, those are our ancestors up there. I think the space gives us a perspective into our past. So we can look at thousands, hundreds of thousands, even billions of years away.
Billions and billions.
In the past. Yeah.
I think that was Carl Sagan who said billions and billions. I don't know if you ever...
Oh, billions and billions. Yes. So the Hubble telescope apparently can look billions of years away into the past. And speaking of Carl Sagan, he also talks about how we come from the star stuff, the cloud of star stuff that's around these stars. They're called nebula, right? He says some part of our being knows this is where we came from. We long to return, and we can because the cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself. And that's something I wanted to talk about. Yeah, so what I think is incredible is that as these stars form and they react, these chemical reactions bring into this world the elements that are necessary for our bodies to be formed.
You know, and I wonder if Van Gogh knew all about any of this or if he just played it by ear, because it seems like as technical as you want to make it, whether you're expressing it in this form or just drawing it on a piece of paper or, you know, making a painting, the way that we interpret the stars is something pretty ancient, and I think it really does help us connect to the universe and to ourselves.
Yeah, and it shows us that we're part of something a lot bigger.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on today, bringing us some Van Gogh, and I can't wait to see what you have next week. I'll see you then.